A spooky segment now, to send some shivers up the spines of my studio audience. The host of TV series Most Haunted, Yvette Fielding, insists that ghosts are the real deal. Now, if you need a Most Haunted refresher, here you go.
Did you make a noise then with your voice?
What was that?
Do you mean as harm? Are you connected to this sarcophagus?
Listen to that.
It came from over here.
The atmosphere down here you can literally cut with a knife.
What is that behind you?
I don't know where that's coming from.
You're attached to this. Is this you?
Honestly, guys, this is incredible.
Right, what the was that?
Hey, sorry, something just grabbed my coat. Something just grabbed my coat.
So this is a debate I've been wanting to have for a while. Are ghosts and supernatural forces real? I'm delighted to say Yvette joins me now, along with broadcaster Glenn Hunt, who, of course, says there's absolutely no scientific proof whatsoever. Welcome both to the show. Yvette, I want to come to you first, if you don't mind. When you got involved in Most Haunted, was this because... were you a sceptic at that point? Is it that the show has convinced you that ghosts exist, or did you always believe that they had?
Well, firstly, I want to say thank you very much for having me on the show. And yes, when I first started 25 years ago, I was not really sure and a bit sceptical about the whole thing. And I was quite frightened about it, really. After, oh my goodness, starting the show, 25 years of paranormal investigations, investigating locations around the world, I have seen and heard things that's completely changed my mind, that no rational explanation, there isn't one. And for me, it's completely changed my life. I'm no longer scared of death. I really want to try and push that message out to people that have lost loved ones, is that there is life after death. And we started Most Haunted Experience, where people can, when people say, oh, Most Haunted's fake, it's all rubbish, I'll say, well, actually, come on board, come with me and the crew. You can choose a location anywhere around the country and see for yourself. Don't make a judgment until you see for yourself. And we've been running for 6 years now, doing these events and changing people's minds, which I think is fantastic. We've had members of the police, we've had members of the armed forces join us, politicians, we've had people love it, and they come along and go, oh my God, this is amazing, and they come along again. So that for me is the most important thing, is just opening people's eyes to it. But I always say seeing is believing. How can we expect anybody to believe anything unless they experience something for themselves?
Well, let me bring Glenn in on that very point. So when I was 4 years old, I saw a ghost. I can still remember what it looks like. Was I just imagining that, or is there something out there?
It's quite likely you were imagining it. I'm sure when I was a young lad in the darkness of my own bedroom, and it was getting dark and the lights were off and you see silhouettes, it's the mind playing tricks on you. Ultimately, 9 times out of 10 you can explain away what you would call paranormal phenomena. That said, the question shouldn't be necessarily, are ghosts real, but what you define to be a ghost.
But all of these examples that Yvette has given, the many, many things that she's seen over the years, it can't be the case, can it, that all of those examples have been just her imagination or some other circumstance?
No, you are right about that, and that is why, if you notice there, I did say 9 times out of 10, because that one time things will happen and there is genuinely no logical explanation for them. And I say that because I am, as Yvette will tell you, a member of the Most Haunted team, and I am the skeptic on the programme. And I have experienced my fair share of paranormal phenomena, but I'm always quick to put my hand up and say, if there's no logical explanation for it, then it is indeed paranormal. But a lot of things can be rationally explained away. It's just that the psyche of going into a location which is deemed to be haunted, your mind works overtime, and you just assume that anything, a creaky floorboard or a door closing in the wind, might be paranormal, but it isn't necessarily the case.
Yvette, can I ask you about that? Is there a risk that when we don't know the explanation for something, we reach these false conclusions? Because just because there isn't an obvious explanation doesn't automatically mean, does it, that the supernatural is the only explanation?
No, absolutely right. And any good paranormal investigator will tell you that if you can't find an answer for something, you don't just jump to, oh, it's a ghost, oh, it's paranormal. There could be many other reasons. At the end of the day, we investigate locations where we've not spent, 2 weeks living there, sleeping there. So we don't know the sounds that the building will make. We don't know, there might be an old man that walks through the village naked at 3 o'clock in the morning. We don't know that, So you've really got to know the building. You've got to know your surroundings. You've got to know all the sounds, everything about that place that you're investigating. And so only if you see something right in front of your face, and I have many, many times, and as you were saying, Andrew, you've seen something yourself. I have seen, I think, 4, the first manifestation I saw, 3 of us saw it at the same time. One person was a parapsychologist who was a cynic. 3 of us saw a pair of legs walking up their own, up the stairs of the Theatre Royal Drury Lane, and we were spending the night there. And it was the most craziest thing I've ever seen in my life, because they were just a pair of legs walking on their own up these stairs. I've seen solid manifestations, a tall man with a bald head. I could describe him very clearly, a very tall man in a hospital, and he just peeked round a column, a pillar, and then peek back. And and when you've seen it, you're not crazy, you're not hallucinating, it's not some sort of form of sleep paralysis. And it's what's so amazing is when more than one of you is seeing the same thing. The whole cast, going back to the Drury Lane Theatre, the whole cast, I've forgotten the name of the production, but I think 20 odd cast members were having a photo call on the stage, and they all saw what is one of the most famous ghosts in Theatreland, called the Man in Grey. And they all saw him walking with his tricorn hat, his grey coat, solid, walking across the circle, in through a wall. Years later, they actually did some excavation, and they were doing the building and some building works, and they actually dug through that part of the wall where this ghost was disappearing through, and they found human remains with a dagger in his ribs. And nobody knows really. There's sort of suspicions about who it could be, but they believe that it was 2 actors. They had a fight, and one actor stabbed the other. But why the body was hidden behind the wall, we don't know. And is this the ghost of the Grey Man? But it's fascinating to me that more than one person saw it. A whole cast stood on the stage, saw it. And this happens so many times. And when scientists, and excuse me, Glenn, but when you say, oh, well, it's not paranormal, it's not good, we're not mad. Some of the most amazing minds in the world were spiritualists and believed in life after death. Thomas Edison, John Logie Baird, who invented the television camera, he was a spiritualist. In fact, he believed in it so much that he thought that Thomas Edison was sending him messages from beyond the grave to help him construct the very first television camera. Einstein, energy cannot die. So all these amazing people, they're not mad. What's going on here? And millions of people around the world have got the most amazing stories to tell. And I'm sure people watching now and listening will tell you the same thing. I've had an experience. I know.
Do you ever feel that maybe there's a risk of hoaxing, for instance? I just want to ask Glenn about that, because we've seen examples where people have hoaxed people. I was reading about the Enfield haunting from the 1970s, and there was testimony that the girls had been bending the spoons and knocking on the walls and things like that. So isn't that always a possibility, Glenn? And shouldn't we be mindful of it?
Of course, you should always be mindful of that kind of thing. Ultimately, if you're watching something online, you might see some viral videos go around where people say that their kitchens are haunted, and if you look closely enough, you might see some fishing wire or something pulling a broomstick over. You can't necessarily rely on what you're seeing. And ultimately, with Most Haunted, I'm fully aware that when we're investigating a location, that's all viewers have got is our word for it. But I can skeptically say that when I've experienced something that I can't rationally explain away, it's a genuine piece of paranormal phenomena. But the question then is, what really is it? What is going on there? How is it doing what it's doing? Because
okay, Glenn, can I ask you, have scientists?
Phenomena.
Glenn, can I ask you if scientists got any kind of explanation for the kind of phenomenon that Yvette was just describing, where multiple people... Look, I get that the thing I saw when I was 4 was probably just my mind. I was taking magic mushrooms or something. But, do you think that it's possible for a collective group of people to have a group hallucination? Is there a scientific explanation for that?
Well, they'll say it's some kind of hysterical effect. So you've got a knock-on effect. When somebody thinks they see something, then somebody else will think they see the same thing as well. That's generally what they will say. Science takes a dim view of the paranormal anyway, because there's so much stigma attached to it, when really what they should be doing is be proper scientists, explore the phenomena more, because there are, as Yvette quite rightly pointed out, genuine examples of real phenomena going on. Of course, always be sensible, look for the logic, where there's a rational explanation, where things can be explained away. Put that to one side. That's the obvious. But that 1%, that's the time when things happen, and there shouldn't be a stigma about it. It's a real phenomena. But the next question going forward is, what is it really? How is it doing it?
So is that the key here, Yvette? Keep an open mind.
Absolutely, you've got to keep an open mind. You've got to go in there. If you're going to go into an investigation, keep your eyes peeled, all your senses about you, but try and think logically as well. Just don't jump to the conclusion that it could be paranormal. But going back to your point, Andrew, about the Enfield poltergeist, that case there, Janet, she was the sort of more the more focal person in that case. There were two girls in it, and they actually did say at the end of the case that they had faked some of the phenomena. But they only did that because they felt, particularly Janet, felt under so much pressure from the press to perform. And there was a very prominent ghost investigator, paranormal investigator called Maurice Grosse, who basically lived in the house, recording everything. I mean, the police even visited that location and saw Lego flying around the room all on its own. The knocking, the tapping, the voice that Janet was coming out with was a man's voice. And this man's voice was saying, "I died of an embolism in the room." And it was really horrible. But they had a vocal analyst, a lady come examine Janet's vocal cords and said it wasn't possible for this young girl to make the noises that she was making, and for her not to have her throat affected in any way. So there's lots and lots of unexplained, strange, very wonderful things that have been recorded by Maurice Grosse. And if anybody wants to check that case out, please do. But just don't look at the negative side. Yes, the press did come. They felt under pressure. And I think Janet was interviewed a couple of years ago where she actually said that. But it's a fascinating case. And there's so many more like them.
Well, I could talk to you about this for hours, but we don't have any more time, I'm afraid. Yvette Fielding and Glenn Hunt, thanks so much for joining me. I love that. I'm really interested in this.
Yeah.
Leo, do you think there's anything in it?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, if you look at any model of physics, scientific model of physics to explain the universe, it's always a deterministic empirical model, which means that free will can't exist. I mean, literally, any scientific model will say that free will can't exist. You can't have an object in the universe, deciding its own course, its own path. And obviously, that's true for socialists because they're entirely governed by society. But I think the fact that free will, I believe it exists. So that means ghosts could possibly exist as well.
Do you think, Francis?
Well, I was listening to that story about the theatre, and that's only proven one thing for me: just don't trust actors.
Yeah. You think that's a hoax?
It's in any shape or form. They stab people. They'll do whatever it takes to get the part. They had a mass hallucination, and all they were there for is because they didn't want to be seen as the odd one out. Don't trust them.
Don't trust that. Well, look, I'm really fascinated by this. I live in a house that was built in 1540, and I'm told it is haunted. So we might come back to this at some other point when something happens to me.